Have you ever noticed that American cities look different from the air than almost anywhere else in the world? Not the skyline at the center, but what surrounds it. Endless rows of houses fanning outward in every direction, each sitting on its own patch of land, connected by wide roads stretching to the horizon. It is a pattern so consistent that it almost seems inevitable. But it wasn't. It was built deliberately, systematically, and driven by forces most people never think about. Let's find out why, right here on Simply Understood. After World War II, millions of American soldiers returned home at once. They wanted stability, a family, a place of their own. The cities they came back to were dense, aging, and expensive. The answer the country reached for was space, land on the edges of cities that was cheap and largely empty. A developer named William Levitt turned that idea into an industrial process. On a stretch of Long Island farmland, he applied assembly line logic to home construction. Different crews moved from lot to lot in sequence. One poured foundations, another framed walls, another installed roofing. At peak production, a finished house came off the line every 16 minutes. Levittown housed over 17,000 families and sold out almost immediately. Developers across the country took notice. But suburbs need roads. Without a reliable connection between a distant neighborhood and a city job, the model falls apart. The federal highway system, launched in 1956, solved that at a national scale. Living 20 or 30 miles from a city center was no longer an obstacle. There was another force working quietly in the background. The federal government backed low-interest mortgages for returning veterans and working families. These loans made buying a suburban house cheaper, month to month, than renting a city apartment. For millions of families, the financial logic pointed in one direction only. What is less often discussed is where those loans did not flow. A practice called redlining systematically denied mortgage access to black families and minorities, regardless of income. Federal maps marked urban neighborhoods as too risky for investment. Suburbs were rated favorably, and the families allowed to move there were, in most cases, white. The suburban boom was not just an economic story. It was also a story about who was included and who was not. The suburb was never simply a product of personal preference. It was the result of interlocking systems: government policy, financial incentives, highway infrastructure, and racially structured access to credit, all pushing in the same direction. As wealthier residents left, city tax revenue declined. Schools and services weakened. That made cities less attractive, pushing more residents outward, weakening cities further. Suburbs kept their tax base local. The gap widened steadily over decades. Very few people at the time thought of it as a system. Families were simply buying homes. Developers were building where land was cheap. Each decision made sense on its own. Together, they remade the American landscape in a way no single person planned or intended. That is perhaps what makes it worth understanding. The suburb feels ordinary because it is everywhere. But ordinary things often have the most complicated histories, built quietly, layer by layer, until they become simply the way things are.